When we speak of angels, we often think of celestial beings cloaked in light, floating somewhere above the realm of human experience. But what if angels are not only supernatural entities, but symbolic mirrors of the wisdom we carry within? A woman surrounded by angels is not merely visited by grace, she embodies it. These angels are archetypes of her own inner knowing, the parts of her that have evolved through trial, transformation, and truth. They do not hover above her, they live within her, and they awaken when she listens to herself deeply. A woman becomes aware of her inner angels the moment she begins to trust her intuition, not as a vague feeling, but as a reliable source of guidance. The voice that says, "This isn't for you," when everyone else claps. The whisper that says, "Wait," when urgency tries to drag her forward. The scream inside her that finally says, "No more," after years of quiet compliance. These are not just emotions, these are messengers of protection. These are the angels of instinct, discernment, and emotional integrity. She doesn't find this wisdom in a book or in a ceremony. She finds it in the discomfort of betrayal, the silence after heartbreak, the moment she picks herself off the floor when no one is watching. Each time she chooses to listen to what she already knows, an angel appears, not to fix her, but to affirm her. These angels speak in the language of boundaries, self-respect, and embodied truth. They are not passive. They are fiercely compassionate. They are not always gentle. Sometimes they come with the sharpness of clarity that slices through delusion. This internal wisdom is layered. Some of it is ancestral, passed down through the bloodline of women who had to know things without being told. Some of it is earned through her own lived contradictions, through loving the wrong people, through staying too long and eventually learning to leave. Each experience becomes a lesson, and each lesson crystallizes into a deeper knowing. And the more she honors that knowing, the more she learns to recognize the difference between fear and foresight. These inner angels are not loud, they will never compete with the noise of the world, they are subtle, often drowned out by the performance of people-pleasing, the desperation for approval, or the addiction to being needed. But when she finally grows tired of abandoning herself, the angels return, not because they ever left, but because she finally became quiet enough to feel them again. To be surrounded by angels, in this sense, is not about divine intervention, it's about alignment. It's about remembering that the deepest wisdom doesn't scream, it whispers. And when a woman begins to trust those whispers more than she trusts the chaos around her, she steps into a sacred relationship with herself. Her angels are her, just awakened, aware, and willing to guide her through the fires she no longer fears to face. Divine protection is often romanticized as something bestowed from the outside, a force that swoops in to rescue, to shelter, to intervene. But for a woman who has walked the long road of self-return, protection isn't something she waits for. It's something she aligns with. True divine protection is not passive. It is activated when she becomes rooted in her truth, when she no longer distorts herself for belonging, and when she lives in harmony with her values, even if it costs her approval. This alignment does not begin in grand gestures. It begins in small choices. The decision to leave the room when her soul starts shrinking. The courage to speak when silence feels safer. The refusal to perform when she knows she is being watched, judged, or misunderstood. These choices do not always feel powerful in the moment. In fact, they often feel terrifying. But something shifts each time she honors herself instead of betraying herself. The air around her changes. Doors close and others open. Relationships fall away, but clarity enters. And in that clarity she begins to notice. She is not alone. Protection shows up as synchronicity, as sudden clarity, as redirection that feels painful but later makes sense. The friendship that ends just before a betrayal. The opportunity that falls through to make space for something more aligned. The delay that turns out to be safety in disguise. These are not coincidences. These are the quiet ways the divine reorganizes her life when she steps into alignment. It doesn't protect her from discomfort, but it protects her from derailing. The woman who is aligned with her truth does not chase safety, because she becomes a sanctuary unto herself. She doesn't rely on charm, compliance, or manipulation to be protected. She relies on coherence. Her life becomes a reflection of her inner world. The more her external choices mirror her internal convictions, the more friction dissolves. There is less confusion, less chaos, fewer lessons repeated. She no longer calls suffering sacred when it's really just misalignment. She no longer blames fate for the consequences of her own disconnection. To be aligned is to be clear, not perfect. It means she is honest about her limitations, tender with her wounds, and bold about her desires. She knows what season she is in. She doesn't force summer when she's in winter. She doesn't perform joy when she is grieving. And in doing so, she allows life to meet her exactly where she is, not where she's pretending to be. That's when the protection deepens. That's when the unseen becomes felt. Because life doesn't protect the masks. It protects the truth. Divine protection is not about shielding her from life's difficulties. It's about preserving her from the unnecessary ones. And the less she negotiates with her own truth, the more she notices what's meant for her doesn't require suffering, sacrificing, or shrinking. It simply requires that she stay close to herself. And in that closeness she is already guarded. Not all angels have wings. Some arrive as endings that break her open. Some show up as people she thought she couldn't live without until their absence gave her breath. Others appear in the form of heartbreak, solitude, illness, or silence so loud it forced her to finally listen. These are the kinds of angels that don't save her from the fire, they walk her into it, knowing she will emerge someone new. A woman doesn't always recognize these angels when they first appear. In fact, she often mistakes them for punishment. She asks why it had to happen this way, why it hurt so deeply, why it took so long to heal. But slowly over time, meaning rises from the ashes. Not always with certainty, not always with joy, but with the understanding that something sacred was hidden in the collapse. These angels don't look divine. They may come with sharp tongues, closed doors, or sudden disappearances. They are the relationships that cracked her illusion, the disappointments that forced her to wake up, the betrayals that taught her the weight of her own boundaries. They are the voices that echoed long after the moment passed, teaching her not how to be harder, but how to be wiser. A woman who is surrounded by angels does not float above the ground. She has walked it, barefoot, bruised, and sometimes blinded by hope. And still, she kept walking. Because something in her, even if she didn't yet know what to call it, told her that there was more. That the loss was not the end, but the clearing. That the detour was not failure, but redirection. That the people who left were not taking something from her, but returning her to herself. Sometimes the angel is a therapist, sometimes it sets a stranger, sets words on a bad day, sometimes it sets the moment she breaks down on the kitchen floor and realizes she can no longer carry what isn't set hers. Sometimes it sets her own voice, quivering but steady, saying enough. These angels do not arrive to give her answers. They arrive to remind her she already has them. They don't offer escape. They offer initiation. And the woman who accepts the invitation does not come back the same. She becomes someone who no longer needs validation to trust her path. Someone who no longer mistakes drama for depth. Someone who knows that being protected doesn't always mean being spared. It means being strengthened in ways that only become clear in hindsight. A woman who walks with these angels doesn't glamorize her scars, but she no longer hides them. They are not signs of failure. They are the marks of her becoming. The ones who couldn't love her right were teachers. The paths that closed off were signs. The silence that terrified her was medicine. And all along, in ways both painful and profound, the angels were never gone. They were just wearing disguises she had to grow wise enough to see through. Spiritual support is not something that simply appears when we are in crisis. It is something we become open to when we are emotionally available to receive it. For a woman to feel guided, To feel held by something greater, she must first become intimate with herself. That means not just thinking about healing or reading about self-love. It means sitting with what hurts, allowing what's real to rise to the surface, and choosing to feel rather than numb. There is a kind of raw vulnerability that many avoid because it demands the surrender of control. It's easier to pray for guidance than to admit we are afraid. Easier to ask for signs than to acknowledge the signs we've already ignored. A woman becomes emotionally available not when she feels strong, but when she allows herself to be seen, even by herself in her weakness. That is when the walls come down. And it is in that space that spiritual support rushes in. The divine does not operate through the performance of perfection. It moves through truth. And emotional availability is the willingness to let truth have its place, even when it is messy, inconvenient, or confusing. A woman who wants spiritual connection but is still hiding from her own grief, resentment, or fear is building a fortress around her heart. Angels cannot land where there is no invitation. To be emotionally available is to risk feeling, to let the tears fall before the answers come, to tell the truth when it might cost something. It is not easy, but it is essential. Because without it, she is not in relationship with the divine, she is only managing a transaction, asking for protection without being willing to be transparent, demanding peace while repressing rage, seeking light while denying shadow. Real spiritual support is personal. It meets her exactly where she is, but it cannot penetrate the armor of someone who is pretending to be fine. The more honest she is with herself, the more obvious the guidance becomes. Not because life suddenly gets easier, but because her inner world becomes clear enough to perceive it. The nudge to rest, the sudden clarity to walk away, the peace she feels after choosing discomfort over dishonesty, these are all expressions of a spiritual ecosystem responding to her openness. When a woman becomes emotionally available, she no longer begs the universe for crumbs of reassurance. She realizes the answers were never missing. She just couldn't hear them through the noise of her own avoidance. Emotional availability quiets that noise. It brings her back to her body, her breath, her inner compass, and it teaches her that the divine does not need her to be healed, only to be honest. The truth is, she was never truly unsupported. She was just disconnected from herself, from her emotions, from the frequency where guidance lives. And once she becomes available again, not to perform, but to feel, she opens the door not only to healing, but to a form of love that does not need to be earned. Loneliness is often mistaken for emptiness, as though something has gone missing from the outside world, a person, a presence, a promise unfulfilled. But the most piercing form of loneliness is not caused by the absence of others, it's caused by the absence of self. A woman can be surrounded by people and still feel hollow if she is not in relationship with her own essence. She can perform, produce, and please while quietly grieving the loss of her inner connection. That is not solitude. That is abandonment. There is a difference between being alone and being lonely. Alone is a state. Lonely is a signal. It's the soul's way of saying, "Come back to me." But most of us are taught to run from this feeling. We fill the silence with distractions. We reach for relationships that serve as placeholders. We numb the ache instead of listening to it. And in doing so, we move further away from ourselves. The angels don't disappear, but we stop recognizing them. We stop trusting the signs. We stop feeling held, because we're no longer holding ourselves. A woman who reclaims herself from loneliness doesn't do it by adding more noise. She does it by turning inward. She learns to sit with the discomfort instead of escaping it. She listens to the ache not as something to fix, but as something to learn from. And in that listening, the fog begins to clear. She remembers who she is beneath the roles, the wounds, the expectations. She rediscovers the part of her that was never broken, never left, never needed to be filled, only acknowledged. The angels that surround her have always been there, but they respond to resonance, not desperation. They speak in the language of alignment, not avoidance. When she is with herself fully honestly, their presence becomes unmistakable. They show up in the quiet realization that she doesn't need validation to be worthy. In the sudden clarity that what she feared losing was never truly hers. In the peace that follows after she stops chasing what was never meant to stay. Loneliness loses its grip, not because someone enters the room, but because she returns to her own. She stops performing and starts feeling. She stops reaching outward and begins resting inward. And what she finds there is not just comfort but truth. The kind of truth that doesn't need to be shouted. The kind that wraps around her like warm light. That is where the angels live, in the place within her that doesn't need to be fixed, only felt. It's easy to think she's been abandoned. But the real question is, when did she stop standing beside herself? When did she begin outsourcing the love, the presence, the safety that only she could offer herself? The loneliness was not the absence of angels. It was the silence that followed when she stopped listening to her own soul. And now, as she returns, slowly, bravely, she finds they were never far, only waiting. There is a profound shift that happens in a woman's life when she begins to honor her sacred yes and her non-negotiable no. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't require confrontation or explanation. It's a quiet return to clarity, a decision to live in alignment with what is true for her rather than what is expected of her. In that shift, the universe begins to respond, not because it suddenly notices her, but because she finally becomes visible to herself. Her yes is not given casually. It is not a people-pleasing nod or a conditioned reflex. It is deliberate, embodied. She gives it when her whole being agrees, not just when her mind has been trained to comply. And when she says yes from that place, it is sacred. It means she is all in. It means she has checked in with her intuition, her boundaries, her energy, and they are aligned. That yes carries weight. It builds trust with herself. It tells her spirit, I am listening. Her no equally is not rooted in resistance but in reverence. She does not say no to punish or reject. She says no to preserve what is vital, to protect what is sacred. Her no is a doorway back to herself. It is not a wall, it is a compass. It points her away from what depletes and toward what sustains. And perhaps most importantly, she stops apologizing for it. She no longer edits her truth to keep the peace, especially when that peace costs her inner stability. At first, this practice can feel isolating. Saying no to what once felt familiar, approval, overgiving, silence, can shake the foundation of her relationships. She might lose things. People may misunderstand her. But the space that opens in the aftermath of those losses is not a void. It is a clearing, a sacred place for what is meant to arrive. And the more she stands in that truth, the more life begins to respond. Opportunities that once passed her by now recognize her energy. Relationships that once felt heavy fall away, making room for depth and reciprocity. Serendipity replaces struggle. What once had to be forced now flows. Not because life has changed, but because she no longer confuses being chosen with being safe. She no longer trades authenticity for comfort. And in doing so, she calls in people, experiences, and paths that are aligned, not with her performance, but with her presence. The universe doesn't reward perfection. It responds to resonance. When a woman becomes clear within herself, her outer world reflects that clarity. Her yes opens doors that lead to soul, not survival. Her no closes the loops that once drained her of power. This isn't magic. It's coherence. And in that coherence, she is no longer waiting to be saved or seen. She becomes a force, rooted, guided, in conversation with the divine, not through begging or pleasing, but through self-honoring. A woman surrounded by angels is not untouched by life. She is deeply shaped by it. Her protection is not passive. It is born of presence, forged in self-honoring choices, and sustained through unwavering alignment with truth. The angels that gather around her are not always soft or seen. They are the whispers of her intuition, the echoes of her boundaries, the clarity that emerges from solitude, and the strength that is born each time she listens inward rather than outward. She does not chase divine favor. She becomes the vessel that invites it through her sacred yes. She opens portals. Through her non-negotiable no, she guards her peace. Her emotional availability becomes the language through which the divine speaks. Her stillness, a sanctuary. Her discernment, a shield. This woman is not powerful because she controls her world. She is powerful because she trusts herself within it. And as she walks, sometimes with grace, sometimes with trembling hands, she is never truly alone. She is guided, protected, held by the unseen forces she once doubted, by the wisdom she has reclaimed, and above all, by the unwavering presence of the angels she now knows were always there, waiting for her to return to herself.